Welcome to Book Nibbles. Big ideas, small bites. Daniel Kahneman's thinking, Fast and Slow, is a deep exploration into how human beings think, make decisions, and misjudge the world around them. Written by a Nobel Prize-winning psychologist who has spent decades studying the quirks of human judgment. The book is not just a presentation of theories, it's a journey through the fascinating landscape of our minds, filled with experiments, anecdotes, and vivid examples that reveal the hidden forces shaping the choices we make every day. Kahneman invites us to understand two characters inside our brains, one that leaps to conclusions quickly, intuitively, almost effortlessly, and another that is deliberate, slower, and more rational, but also lazier, often allowing the fast system to take the lead, even when it shouldn't. The story begins with the two modes of thought that Kahneman calls System 1 and System 2. System 1 is the fast, intuitive, automatic mode of thinking. It's the one that allows you to recognize a face instantly in a crowd, complete the phrase bread and with butter, or swerve suddenly when a car veers into your lane. It operates effortlessly and unconsciously, saving us time and energy. System 2, on the other hand, is the slow, deliberate, effortful mode of thinking. It kicks in when you solve a math problem like 17 times 24, fill out a tax form, or reason through a difficult decision. Unlike System 1, which is always active and dominant, System 2 requires conscious effort and is easily fatigued. A key insight is that while we like to think of ourselves as rational beings who rely on System 2, much of our life is run on autopilot by System 1. And even when System 2 is in charge, it often rubber stamps System 1's intuitive judgments. Kahneman illustrates this dynamic with striking examples. Imagine you're shown a picture of a smiling man and asked whether he is trustworthy. Almost immediately, without deliberation, you form an impression. That's System 1 at work. Later, if you're asked to analyze his past behavior, read reports, and make a reasoned judgment, System 2 gets involved. The problem is that System 1 is full of biases. It uses shortcuts, known as heuristics, which often lead to errors. One classic demonstration is the bat and ball problem. A bat and a ball cost $1.10 in total, and the bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? System 1 immediately suggests 10 cents because it feels right, but that's wrong. The correct answer is 5 cents, which requires System 2 to slow down and check the math. This simple example reveals how our intuitive brain can fool us with answers that feel compelling but are incorrect. Throughout the book, Kahneman reveals a long list of these cognitive illusions. One of the most important is the concept of anchoring. Anchors are arbitrary numbers or ideas that influence our judgments without us realizing it. In one study, people were asked whether the percentage of African nations in the United Nations was higher or lower than a random number spun on a wheel. Then they were asked for their actual guess. Even though the number from the wheel was irrelevant, it significantly affected their answers. A spin of 10 led to lower estimates, while a spin of 65 led to higher ones. Anchoring shows up everywhere, in salary negotiations, real estate pricing, or even when you're shopping and see a product marked down from an inflated original price. Our minds latch onto numbers, even arbitrary ones, and they shape our decisions. Knowing this, a practical trick is to be mindful of anchors in your own judgments and to strategically set anchors when negotiating. Another powerful illusion is availability. System 1 relies on ease of recall, to judge probability, which means that events that are vivid, recent, or emotionally charged feel more common than they are. If you read about a plane crash in the news, you might start feeling that flying is dangerous, even though statistically it's safer than driving. This is because images of plane crashes are dramatic and stick in memory, while car crashes, though far more frequent, don't receive the same media attention. Kahneman explains that availability shapes public perception and policy. For example, after the terrorist attacks of September 11th, many people avoided flying and drove instead, leading to an increase in traffic deaths. The danger wasn't flying, it was the distorted perception of risk created by availability bias. The lesson here is to separate feelings of fear from actual probabilities, though it requires deliberate effort from System 2. Closely tied to availability is the representativeness heuristic, which describes our tendency to judge the likelihood of something based on how much it resembles a stereotype, rather than on actual statistical base rates. Kahneman illustrates this with the famous Linda problem. Participants are told that Linda is 31 years old, single, outspoken, and deeply concerned with social justice. Then they are asked which is more likely, that Linda is a bank teller or that she is a bank teller and active in the feminist movement. Most people choose the latter because the description matches the stereotype of a feminist. But this is a logical error known as the conjunction fallacy. It is always more probable that someone belongs to one category than to that category and an additional one. Yet System 1 finds the stereotype so compelling that it overrides logic. This example highlights how intuitions can violate basic probability, and it teaches us to pause and check the math before following gut feelings. Kahneman doesn't just point out errors, he shows how deeply ingrained they are. Take the phenomenon of overconfidence. Human beings are notoriously bad at knowing what they don't know. Experts, in particular, often have an illusion of validity, believing in their judgments more strongly than evidence warrants. Kahneman shares stories of stock traders who are certain about their predictions, even though their performance is no better than random chance. In one study of investment advisors, their year-to-year performance showed almost no correlation, like dice rolls, yet they all felt confident in their skill. The same applies to business executives who credit their success to their brilliance, when luck and external factors play a huge role. Kahneman's warning is sobering. The world is far more uncertain than our minds admit, and humility about what we can predict is a crucial step toward wiser decision-making. Linked to overconfidence is hindsight bias, the tendency to see events as more predictable after they've happened. After a crisis, like the 2008 financial meltdown, people look back and say it was obvious all along, but in reality, it wasn't. This illusion distorts how we learn from history, because we think we saw it coming when we didn't. It also punishes decision-makers unfairly, because outcomes that look inevitable in hindsight weren't foreseeable in the moment. Kahneman emphasizes that true foresight is far rarer than hindsight makes it appear, and one antidote is to practice thinking in terms of probabilities rather than certainties. Another thread running through the book is the power of framing. The way a choice is presented dramatically alters decisions, even if the underlying facts are the same. In one experiment, people were asked whether they would support a medical program expected to save 200 lives out of 600 people at risk. Most supported it. But when the same program was described as one where 400 people would die, support dropped, even though the outcome is identical. This demonstrates loss aversion. The idea that people dislike losses more than they like equivalent gains. Losing $100 feels worse than the joy of gaining $100. This asymmetry drives much of human behavior, from risk-averse investment strategies to stubbornness in negotiations. For instance, people often hold on to losing stocks to avoid admitting a loss, even when rational analysis suggests selling. Understanding framing can help us rephrase decisions to avoid emotional pitfalls and to see equivalent options more clearly. Kahneman also delves into prospect theory, the Nobel-winning work he developed with his collaborator Amos Tversky. Prospect theory shows how people value outcomes relative to a reference point, rather than in absolute terms, and how losses loom larger than gains. Imagine you're offered two choices: a sure gain of $500 or a 50% chance to win $1,000. Most people choose the sure $500, even though the expected value is the same. But when the choices involve losses, say a sure loss of $500 versus a 50% chance to lose $1,000, people flip and prefer the gamble. This risk-seeking in losses and risk aversion in gains demonstrates that our preferences are not consistent, but depend on how choices are framed relative to perceived gains and losses. This theory revolutionized economics by showing that people are not rational utility maximizers, as classical economics assumed, but psychological creatures driven by perceptions and emotions. An especially memorable part of the book is the distinction between the experiencing self and the remembering self. The experiencing self lives in the present moment, feeling pleasure or pain as events unfold. The remembering self looks back and evaluates experiences based on how they ended and how intense the peak moments were. This explains why people might rate a longer painful procedure with a less painful ending as better than a shorter but more intensely painful one. The peak end rule, as Kahneman calls it, means that our memories of experiences don't match the sum of the moments. Instead, they're shaped by peaks and endings. For instance, a vacation with a few great highlights and a happy ending might be remembered more fondly than a longer vacation with consistent mild enjoyment but a disappointing finish. This gap between living and remembering has profound implications for how we pursue happiness. It suggests that we may make choices for the sake of better memories rather than better actual experiences, like taking photos during a trip to create memories rather than to enjoy the moment itself. Kahneman's storytelling is enriched with everyday applications. He warns managers and policymakers about the dangers of intuitive decision-making without statistical checks. He urges individuals to slow down when stakes are high, to deliberately engage System 2, and to be skeptical of their own confidence. Practical tips emerge, such as seeking outside views to counteract overconfidence, avoiding anchoring traps by preparing reference points in advance, and framing decisions in terms of probabilities rather than certainties. He also highlights the importance of using checklists and structured processes in domains like medicine and aviation to reduce human error, examples where awareness of cognitive biases has saved lives. The book also explores fascinating quirks like regression to the mean, which often misleads people into seeing causal patterns where none exist. For example, an instructor might praise a student for a great performance, then see them perform worse next time, and wrongly conclude that praise backfired. In reality, extreme performances are usually followed by more average ones simply due to statistical regression. Understanding this helps prevent false attributions of success or failure to actions that had little to do with the outcome. In weaving all these threads, Kahneman offers a humbling message. Our minds are not built for perfect rationality. We are storytellers, prone to constructing coherent narratives out of incomplete information, fooled by randomness, swayed by emotions, and guided by shortcuts that usually serve us well but often betray us. Yet rather than despair, he suggests we can learn to recognize these tendencies, design systems and institutions that account for them, and cultivate habits of thought that reduce the likelihood of catastrophic errors. Awareness doesn't eliminate bias, but it allows us to anticipate where we are most vulnerable. Ultimately, thinking fast and slow is both a catalogue of human cognitive fallibility and a call to humility. It's not a self-help book promising quick fixes, but it equips readers with a toolkit of insights. When you catch yourself jumping to conclusions, you can ask whether System 1 is misleading you. When you feel overly confident in a prediction, you can remind yourself of hindsight bias and the role of chance. When faced with a risky decision, you can consider how framing and loss aversion might be distorting your view. And when you think about happiness, you can ask whether you're choosing for the experiencing self or the remembering self. Kahneman's work encourages a lifelong practice of slowing down, questioning assumptions, and acknowledging uncertainty. By the end of the book, readers are left with a heightened awareness of how the mind really works, not as a perfectly rational calculator, but as a two-system machine, evolved to make quick judgments in a complex world. This understanding is not meant to paralyze us, but to help us navigate life more wisely, to design better policies, and to cultivate compassion for our own mistakes and those of others. Because once we see that everyone is subject to these biases, it becomes easier to forgive, to correct, and to strive toward better collective decisions. Kahneman has given us not just a book of psychology, but a lens through which to view the world, and once you look through it, you cannot unsee the illusions, shortcuts, and surprises of the human mind. And that's it. Thinking, Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. Thanks for listening to Book Nibbles. If you enjoyed this bite-sized book, don't forget to subscribe for more quick, insightful summaries. See you in the next nibble.